and a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 20th February 2026, brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be covering the 7 set of current affairs issues which have featured in today's newspaper. The handout of this very discussion has been pinned in the comment section below for your future reference. Beginning with the analysis section, in the first topic, we'll try and understand that why when it comes to India, the EV penetration is far below the global average despite the policy support provided by the government in this respect. And we'll also try to understand that how we can unlock the potential of the EV sector when it comes to India. Moving on to the second topic, as recently the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has introduced certain changes when it comes to GDP estimation methodology. So in this respect, we will try to understand that what were the issues with the previous estimation method and what all changes have been introduced when it comes to the new methodology. Moving on to the prelim pointer segment, herein we'll be covering the 5 set of current affairs issues and we'll be doing the value addition which would be relevant from your upcoming prelims examination. So stay tuned. Now, let's begin with the first topic, which is dealing with the electric vehicles penetration in India. This particular topic we can associate with GS paper 3, primarily the infrastructure topic, and in that also we have a subtopic, that is roads. So what is the context right now? So the Commission for Air Quality Management, which basically looks into the air quality in the Delhi NCR region, has constituted a committee which is led by Ashok Jhunjhunwala, who is basically an professor at IIT Madras. Now this committee points out to a fact that when it comes to vehicular emissions, especially in the Delhi NCR region, they account for 23% of the PM 2.5 concentration. And that leads to poor air quality, especially during the winter seasons in the Delhi NCR region. Now, keeping this fact in mind, this committee has made a very controversial proposal. That proposal is that from 2030 onwards, only and only electric cars would be registered in the Delhi NCR region. Now, the car makers, the automobile companies are not ready to accept this controversial proposal. Why? Because the ground reality is not in alignment with the proposal given by this committee. What do I mean by ground reality? The charging infrastructure when it comes to India is very poor. And that is the reason the automobile companies are making a very valid point that how can you enforce this thing from 2030 onwards when you don't have sufficient charging infrastructure in place. As an alternative, the automobile companies are making a suggestion to this Commission for Air Quality Management that instead of imposing electric vehicles, give a push to CNG powered vehicles, okay, because CNG is also a, better fuel when it comes to petrol and diesel because it leads to less emission of harmful gases as compared to petrol and diesel. And the automobile companies are making a very valid point that when it comes to EV vehicles, that should be given a push when it comes to the two-wheeler segment, okay. When it comes to the other segments which are there, that is three-wheelers, buses, etc., therein you should go for CNG powered vehicles. Don't just impose this electric vehicle thing. Now let's just try and understand that what is the scenario when it comes to the electric vehicles in India. Now if you go by the NITI Aayog report of 2025, which is titled as Unlocking a $200 billion opportunity, this report clearly points out that when it comes to the EV penetration rate in India, it is quite less if you compare it with the global average. When it comes to India, the penetration rate has improved, okay, from 2016 to 2024. We had a penetration rate of less than 1% and we have made remarkable progress in this respect. We have increased it to 7.6%. In the same time period, if you look at the global EV penetration rate, it has improved from 3% roughly to 16%. So we are far below what you see at the global level. Now, first thing that we need to understand is, why do we need to focus upon electric mobility? What is the need? First reason is to ensure environment sustainability. Right now in the article itself we read that when it comes to Delhi NCR region itself, the vehicular emission account for 23% of particulate matter 2.5 concentration in the Delhi NCR region. And NITI Aayog has further pointed out that when it comes to the road transport, it contributes around 14 to 15% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So if you want to improve the air quality, you need to give a flip to the e-mobility. We need to move in this particular direction. Then it is also needed to reduce the import dependence. We are heavily dependent when it comes to crude oil. More than 80% of our crude oil needs we are satisfying through imports only, and that leads to current account deficit when it comes to India. When it comes to the current account deficit when it comes to India, this year economic survey has rightly pointed out that it is roughly around 1% of the GDP. And this CAD is within a manageable level because of the services export, okay, that we do. Because in the goods segment, we are not performing well. So we need to give push to this e-mobility thing so that we can reduce our dependence on the crude oil. Bureau of Energy Efficiency has pointed out that transport sector accounts for 18% of total energy consumption in India. And if we don't give a push to this e-mobility thing, the current account deficit is likely to increase over a period of time. And this is also not good from the environment point of view. We have already understood. Then, if we focus upon the EV sector, there is a huge export potential also, because nowadays the consumers are becoming more and more aware. Okay, they want to reduce their carbon footprint. So we can tap those conscious consumers. Already when it comes to the automobile sector, India has surpassed Japan and it has become the third largest auto market globally. So there's huge export potential which we need to tap. $200 billion opportunity outlined by NITI Aayog itself. Then the economic survey of 2023 has pointed out that when it comes to this EV industry, it has the ability to create around 5 crore jobs by 2030. So this would lead to creation of more and more green jobs also. And lastly, it is needed to realize the idea of Make in India. And in this respect, we have made great advancement. As you can see here, that how this Ola Gigafactory in Tamil Nadu is making advancement when it comes to creating lithium-ion battery cells indigenously, Bharat cells. Okay, so this is needed to realize the idea of Make in India, because when it comes to automobile sector, you need to make note of this particular fact that it contributes around 7% to India's GDP and 49% when it comes to manufacturing output. So if you focus upon EV sector, there's a huge potential for job creation, there's huge export potential, and this would also help us to enhance the manufacturing capabilities when it comes to India. Now, having understood the need, let's try and understand that what are the challenges due to which we are not seeing an improved EV penetration in India. Why the EV penetration is still less as compared to the global average. First and the foremost factor is the cost. You know that when it comes to Indian consumers, we are very conscious when it comes to the money that we have to pay. And this is one of the major reasons why you see less demand of the electric vehicles segment. You compare the price of Tata Nexon EV vehicle priced at 15 lakh and petrol powered vehicle merely 7 to 8 lakhs. Conscious Indian consumers would prefer the petrol powered vehicle. Another problem is the range anxiety. What is this range anxiety? Whosoever is owning an electric vehicle would know that what is this range anxiety. Once you have charged the vehicle, you don't know till what point the vehicle would be able to cover the distance. And what if in between I don't found a charging station? When it comes to CNG powered vehicles, when it comes to petrol and diesel, we know that you get the refilling, points throughout even if you have to travel a long distance. But that is not the case when it comes to EVs. There is still a lack of charging infrastructure in India. That leads to range anxiety. Then there is limited charging infrastructure. Although when it comes to the charging infrastructure, we have made great advancement because of the FAME scheme that we had. We have almost increased the charging infrastructure by 5 times, okay, when you compare the data of 2022 to 2025. But the problem is, even today, the charging infrastructure that you have in place, it is very less. We merely have one charging infrastructure for every 235 vehicle in India. That actually leads to range anxiety. And today itself in The Hindu, an article appeared wherein the Central Electricity Authority, they have pointed out that when it comes to the charging infrastructure that we have, it is incapable of smoothly making a switch from getting the power from coal and using solar or wind energy. And this could jeopardize, this grid oscillation can jeopardize the transmission equipment that we have. So that is another problem. Then there is issue with the battery manufacturing system. Although when it comes to this Ola gig factory that we have in Tamil Nadu, herein we are coming up with Bharat cells and all. But if you go by last year economic survey, you can very well see this particular fact that India is dependent upon China when it comes to lithium ion battery. 75% of our lithium ion battery needs are met from imports from China. Then it also leads to e-waste issues. Already the Global E-Waste Monitor 2024 has pointed out that India is third globally when it comes to e-waste generation. And the problem is, when it comes to e-waste in India, it is not scientifically managed. Rather, the e-waste in India is managed through the informal segment. So that leads to ground pollution, soil pollution, air pollution, and that also negatively impacts the health of the women and the children who are engaged when it comes to unscientific management of e-waste in India. That's another problem. And lastly, there are safety concerns as well. There has been various instances wherein we have seen that the Ola e-scooter have caught fire. This was an incident which was reported in Pune also, in Tamil Nadu also, and various other places also. So that somewhere, shakes the confidence when it comes to Indian consumer, when it comes to the EV segment. Having understood the challenges, let's understand that what all policy support the government is providing to improve the EV penetration in India. First and foremost, we have the PM E-Drive scheme, which was introduced in 2024. This scheme is basically focusing upon improving the demand of the EV segment, okay, the EV vehicles. Here, the demand-based incentives are provided. Basically, if let's suppose a two-wheeler, EV two-wheeler is costing around 1.5 lakh, so the government would be providing you some incentive and ultimately you have to pay only 1 lakh. So when it comes to this PM E-Drive scheme, it is basically covering the two-wheeler, the e-buses, trucks, etc. So we are trying to introduce the EV vehicles, especially when it comes to public transportation. And herein, the incentive would be provided by the government based on the quality of battery storage, okay, storage capacity of the battery being used in that vehicle and the battery technology. So higher would be the storage capacity of that battery, better would be the technology, higher would be the incentive provided by the government. And you need to make note of this particular fact that this particular scheme is being implemented by Ministry of Heavy Industries. Okay, you can get a prelims question in this respect. Then another scheme that we have is PM E-Bus Seva scheme, again introduced in 2024. So under this, the government is providing assistance to around 10,000 e-buses which are operating in around 169 cities in India. As and when cities come, you get this particular fact that the nodal ministry for implementing this PM E-Bus Seva scheme is Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. When it comes to this particular scheme, how does it operate? So herein, the government is providing the assistance of roughly rupees 25 per kilometer. Now, what if the private sector is making losses? Then in that case, the state government has to compensate the private sector for the loss. And what if the state government do not have the necessary fund to compensate the private sector who is running the e-buses? In that case, the central government would come forward and it would be covering the losses when it comes to the private sector, and it would be giving the money from Payment Security Fund. Later on, it would be getting the money from the state government within a time-bound period. That is what is PM E-Bus Seva. And then we are also making a push when it comes to the battery manufacturing. So we have the PLI scheme for advanced chemistry cell battery manufacturing, so that we can reduce our reliance when it comes to China. And state governments are also giving various incentives, for example, lower toll fee, zero parking fees for the EV vehicles. Now, what more needs to be done so that we can improve the EV penetration rate in India? Because this is the need of the hour, keeping in mind climate change is the new reality. So, Niti Aayog in its reports point out that we need to make a shift from incentive model to mandate-based approach. What is this incentive model? We have right now understood that under PM E-Drive, under PM E-Bus Seva, what the government is doing? incentivizing you to switch to EV vehicles. But the Niti Aayog points out that we also need to go for mandate-based approach, basically telling the private sector that by this particular year, certain percentage of EV vehicles you have to produce. This is mandatory. In this respect, you can quote the case study of Vietnam, wherein the Vietnam government has clearly stated that by 2040, no new production of fossil fuel vehicles or internal combustion engines based vehicles would be produced. Okay, and this thing we can follow in case of India also. We, at one instant, let's suppose we are levying zero parking fee, lower toll taxes when it comes to electric vehicles. Reverse needs to be done for the petrol powered or diesel powered vehicles. Higher toll tax, higher parking fee, higher GST when you're buying the internal combustion engines based vehicles. Okay, so that is something that needs to be done. Then we need to focus on a subset of vehicle fleet. You need to understand, when it comes to India, we have a unique mobility pattern. When it comes to the two-wheelers, they are majorly used for personal use, and when it comes to bus and trucks and all, okay, therein we have the public transportation. And when it comes to the automobile sector, you will see that there is a dominance of two-wheelers. Okay, so the Niti Aayog in its reports point out that we need to have two types of charging infrastructure. One would be the distributed charging infrastructure, basically for two-wheelers, for EV cars, and these charging stations could be based at home level itself. For public transportation segment, we need to have a concentrated charging infrastructure. What do I mean by concentrated charging infrastructure? Basically putting in place charging infrastructure at auto stands, bus stands, highway for the buses, for the e-rickshaws, etc. Okay. Then we need to follow battery as a service model. What does this mean? This means that I simply need to buy an electric vehicle. I don't need to buy a battery, because battery comprise, or it accounts for 50 to 60% of the total cost of electric vehicle. I can just lease out that battery from a company. And in this respect, you can quote the example of Battery Smart, which is a company which is doing great when it comes to leasing out the batteries to two-wheelers and e-rickshaws. Okay, so you can quote this example as well as a case study. Then we need to bring loans given by the banks for buying e-vehicles under the priority sector lending norms, like what SBI has done. It has come up with green car loan. The Union Bank of India also has come up with the green miles, but this is not a thing which is across the banks. So if you want that the bank should come forward and provide the loans for buying e-vehicles, for that we need to bring the EV segment, okay, loans for this particular purpose under the priority sector lending norms. That would incentivize the banks to give the loans for this particular purpose. Then, to improve the awareness when it comes to charging infrastructure, we need to be guided by the EU model. EU has charge map model, wherein you can download the app and you can very well see that where all the charging infrastructure is available. That would go a long way, okay, to address the range anxiety that we see in India. And obviously, you have to improve the charging infrastructure as well, because that is inadequate. Lastly, to give a flip to the e-mobility and to reduce, at the same time, if you want to reduce your dependence upon China when it comes to lithium-ion battery, what we need to do? We need to focus upon sodium-ion batteries. Okay, we need to come up with rare-free batteries, like what the Chara Technologies have done. It has come up with rare earth-free batteries. Okay, so such kind of R&D needs to be carried forward. For this, the government should come forward and provide the necessary funding support. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. I have framed a practice question for you people. So based on whatever we have discussed, please try and attempt this particular question. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, beginning with the second topic, which is dealing with the new GDP series. As recently, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has unveiled the new way how we'll be estimating the GDP. This particular topic you can associate with GS Paper 3, Indian Economy, Issues Related to Growth and Development. Now, first, let's just quickly cover the basics. Now, how the GDP is actually estimated? There are three ways through which you can calculate the GDP. First is the product or the value added method. Now, the product or the value added method does not mean that I simply add the value of the final output produced by the different firms. Because if I do that, this would lead to an overestimated figure of GDP. In this case, it would turn out to be 300. And this would lead to instance of double counting. Why? Because here if you see in this particular example, the wheat produced by farmer some of it has been used as an intermediate good by the bakery shop. So when it comes to the value added method, I would not be just simply adding the value of the final output produced by different firms. What I'll be doing, I will be deducting the value of the input from the value of the output, and then I'll be clubbing the two. 100 plus 150 turns out to be 250. This would be the real value of the GDP, okay, and not 300. 300 is an overestimated figure. That figure I'm getting because of the double counting. Okay. Now, when it comes to the value added method, how do you get this? So, I'll be calculating GVA for every firm, and then what I'll do the summation of the GVA of all the firms which are operating in the economy. Now, when it comes to this product method or the value added method, this is used for primary firms, okay, the firms which are operating in the primary sector, the registered firms which maintain proper data and all. Now, let's move on to the second method, that is the income method. So, simply you have to add up the income which is earned by the four factors of production. What are the four factors of production? Labor, then you have land, then you have entrepreneur, and then you have capital. So, for labor you have wages, for land you have rent, for capital you have interest, for entrepreneur you have profit. So, I just need to simply add the factor payments earned by the four factors of production. And this income method is usually used for services segment, okay, because therein we cannot see that what all output they have produced. So, income method is used there to calculate their contribution to the GDP. So, here you will be summing up the compensation of employees. It includes wages, bonus and other benefits also provided by the firm in which you are working. Then we have the operating surplus. So, apart from the wages, other factor payments are basically clubbed under operating surplus. And for self-employed people who do not maintain a proper, account, for example, a street vendor or a rickshaw puller, they do not maintain a proper account, so that you can segregate, okay, what is the operating surplus and what is the the wages of the employees. So, in that case, we go by mixed income. So, you club the entire income earned by them. However, when it comes to self-employed people who are maintaining proper accounts, in that case, if you are able to segregate that what is the component of wages, what is the component of the operating surplus, so accordingly, you will be calculating them. The last method is the expenditure method. Simply, we will be looking at the expenditure side. So, how do you get the GDP through expenditure method? I'll be adding up the private final consumption expenditure, then the gross fixed capital formation, that is the I, then you have the expenditure made by the government, and then you have net export. I've already told you that net export when it comes to India is negative because we have a current account deficit roughly around 1% of the GDP. When it comes to India, time and again I've told you that we are a consumption-led economy. That is the reason you see that private final consumption expenditure accounts for around 60% of India's GDP. That is the reason government is more concerned about the private final consumption expenditure. Now, theoretically, all these methods, whether it is value added method, income method or expenditure method, all these methods should give me a single figure of GDP. But in reality, that is not happening, okay? Because when it comes to the expenditure method, we are able to see that, okay, what all money everybody is spending, that is accounted well. But when it comes to the value added method, it is not able to take into account the shadow economy. Shadow economy does not refer to an illegal firm. It is a legal firm, but it is not registered, maybe in the GST network, and the government is also not able to levy the tax. So, because of the shadow economy, normally when it comes to India, you see a slight discrepancy in the GDP figure calculated via value added method, product method or the expenditure method. Now, let's just further understand that what were the other problems with the previous methodology when it comes to GDP estimation. So, majority of the criticism that I have written, that has been given by the former Chief Economic Advisor of India, that is Arvind Subramanian. Now, the first criticism given by him is that there is presence of large number of shell companies when it comes to the MCA database, MCA 21 database. What are shell companies? Which are actually working on paper. They are saying that, okay, this much amount of production we are doing, but in reality, they are just on paper. They are not actually doing any sort of production. So, according to Arvind Subramanian, since we are not able to differentiate that how many companies are actually active companies, basically doing real production and how many of them are shell companies. So that at times lead to overestimation of GDP figures. Arvind Subramaniam says that it leads to overestimation of around 1% to 1.5% when it comes to GDP. Another problem pointed out by him only is that when it comes to the informal sector, we don't have any such, way to actually take into account their contribution to the GDP. So what the government usually do, they track the performance of the formal sector through the index of industrial production, and based on that, they assume that the way formal sector is performing, the same way informal sector would also be performing. So whatever formal sector data we have, we just extrapolate that for the informal sector. Now, there was quite discrepancy when it comes to performance of formal sector and the informal sector, especially when the GST was introduced and especially after demonetization. So the figures of GDP were overestimated because after demonetization, the informal sector got badly impacted. So the figures and the ground reality were not in alignment with each other. That is what is the another criticism pointed out by Arvind Subramaniam. Another problem, I have already told you that theoretically we say that does not matter through which method you are calculating the GDP, all the method would give you the same value of GDP. But that's not the case in India, because in India we also have shadow economy, which is not registered with the government and the government is not able to tax that. So if you're not able to tax a particular firm, you also would not be having the requisite data set that what amount of production they are doing. Okay, so that is the reason there is a discrepancy when you calculate GDP through production method and through expenditure method. Then another criticism was that we were not following the international practice of revising the base year every 5 years. Why revising the base year every 5 years is important? Because within 5 years, there are structural changes in the economy. We have been using the base year of 2011-12 previously. Now, if you compare 2011-12 with 22-23, okay, this is the new base year that we have adopted. A lot of things have changed. We didn't have GST previously, but now we have GST. The gig economy, which is thriving right now, that was not well developed when it comes to 2011 and 12. And the commodities also which are consumed by the people, that has also undergone a remarkable shift over a period of time. Okay, so the services sector is growing manifold. Startups and all, they are emerging. They were not present previously. So if you talk about India, till now we have done 8 revisions. Okay, this is the 8th revision that we have done. So previously the base year was 1948-49 and this is the 8th revision of the base year that we have done. So we have shifted the base year from 2011-12 to 22-23 and this is going to be the base year for index of industrial production also. And when it comes to CPI, what is the base year? For CPI, it is 2024. For WPI, we have not changed the base year. Another problem was the single deflation that we were doing. What is the single deflation? Let's understand. Under single deflation, how do you calculate the real GVA? So real GVA is calculated as the nominal GVA, gross value added, divided by the output price index. Output price index basically tells me that what is the change in the price of the output in this year, compare it with the base year. Okay, so based on that, I used to do single deflation. But it used to create a lot of problem when it comes to getting the accurate picture. Why? Let's understand. When it comes to single deflation, we are assuming somewhere that the output prices and the input prices, they are going in same direction. But there could be a possible scenario that wherein the input prices are not increasing at a faster rate, okay, or rather they can also fall, but the output prices are rising fairly or they are, at a comfortable level. Now, if you do single deflation only, what would be the problem? You will end up assuming that since we are getting a higher real GVA through this single deflation, you will end up assuming that there is an increase in the real production that has happened. But in reality, it would be basically the rise in the nominal profits because the firm would be making profit. The price of input has not increased, but the price of output has increased. So it is not really the increase in production, but it is actually the increase in nominal profits, which we are inaccurately assuming that it is an increase in real production. So In the present methodology that we have adopted, we are trying to address these issues. We'll understand how. Now you need to understand that why the government has brought this change when it comes to methodology. Because last year itself, IMF has given C rating to the national accounts. Why? Because we were using an outdated base year data, that was 2011 and 12. Unlike the international practice that is suggested by UN's system of national accounts, that a country should update the base year every 5 years, because within 5 years, these structural changes took place in an economy. And to capture those structural transformation, we need to keep on changing the base year. Now, let's understand that what all changes we have done when it comes to methodology. First and foremost, we are shifting from single deflation to double deflation. In double deflation, what you will be doing? You will be deflating the output with the output price index, and then you will be calculating the change in the input also. So you will be deflating the cost of raw materials, that is input, and you will be dividing it with input price index. And what we will be doing here? So whatever value of output you are getting, real output, minus the value of input that you are getting through this particular formula. So whatever would be the value, that would tell us that whether there is an increase in real production or not. So this double deflation would help us calculate the GVA with utmost accuracy. And this is the international practice also, which is followed in other economies as well. Okay, so this would help us better isolate the real growth from price changes and improving the accuracy. This is the first change, double deflation. Then earlier what used to do, we used to go for apportionment. What is apportionment? We used to calculate the national level gross value addition for a particular sector, and then we used to divide that state-wise, okay, based on certain proxies, like what is the number of employees, what is the level of local consumption in that particular state. Okay, so it is like an estimation that we are doing. We are drawing conclusions. We don't have an adequate data to suffice the fact. We are just using proxies because we don't have adequate survey and data to look into the fact that when it comes to a particular sector, that sector is performing well in which of the states. Okay. Now to address this thing, and especially to effectively calculate the contribution of the unorganized sector or the informal sector, now we will be using better data sets. And what are those data sets? One is the annual survey of unincorporated sector enterprises, okay, which provides yearly data when it comes to performance of unorganized sector businesses. And we also be using the periodic labor force survey, which also comes up with the monthly data also, and it also comes up with the data on a quarterly basis as well. So this would enable us to effectively capture the contribution of unorganized sector when it comes to the GDP of India. And we would be, whatever data we'll be getting, we will be cross-verifying it by using the GST data, because in GST we have reverse charge mechanism also, okay, wherein not the seller but the buyer has the responsibility to pay the GST to the government. Okay, so that ways we will be able to cross-verify that whether the data set that we are getting by using these two survey, is it accurate or not, to capture the contribution of unorganized sector to GDP. Now, in this new methodology, we have addressed the discrepancy in the GDP figures that we were getting by using product method and the expenditure method. How are we trying to address that? Firstly, by using new data sets. For example, GST data set, e-Vahan data set, etc. Okay, which are more frequent and they are coming at a shorter period. That would give us a fair idea of the expenditure part. Then we are also going to come up with a supply and use table. So supply table would tell us that what the industries have produced, okay, basically the product part, and use table would tell us that what all products are used by industries and as an intermediate good, and what is used by the final consumer. And at the end, we will try to balance the supply side with the use side, basically balancing the total supply with the total demand. Demand side basically tell us the how you calculate GDP through expenditure method, and when it comes to the product, it is basically talking about the supply part, and that's how we will address the discrepancy in the GDP figures. Then another change that we have done is, earlier when it comes to a particular corporation which is working in various involved in various activities. Okay, it is in real estate also, it is in finance also. So earlier what used to do, the government used to do, it used to look into that which is the major activity of that enterprise. And accordingly, whatever value addition was done by that particular entity, we used to club that in that major activity. Maybe some entity is working great in the, their major share of revenues coming from finances. So despite the fact they are also contributing in the real estate, we will just club the entire value addition done by that particular enterprise in the financial sector. So that does not give us an accurate picture when it comes to the different sectors. So now what change we have done, the entities which are working in various domains, they have to report the activity wise share of their turnover, so that we can get a adequate picture when it comes to the different sectors which are there in the Indian economy. And lastly, we are going to incorporate the hired domestic workers like maids who are cooking food for you. So they would be basically classified as activities of households as employers of domestic personals. Their work would also be taken into account in the GDP estimation. And how we are going to do that? We will be calculating this by getting a number of such workers, okay, hired domestic workers, and we'll be multiplying that with the wages. And this estimation we'll be doing on an annual basis. And then we'll also be capturing the activities of digital platform and gig economy, okay, because they have grown manifold in the recent times. So it is very important that you capture this new segment when it comes to the Indian economy in the GDP figures as well. Now, having understood the changes that we have done, let's understand that what more needs to be done. First and foremost, we should make it a practice of revising the base year every 5 years. Okay, that is the international practice suggested by UN also, and this is something that we need to follow, UN systems of accounts. Then, it is important that we come up with a back series. The government has given the assurance that by December 2026, they will be providing us with the back series data also, because now the GDP figure you have released by using the new methodology, it becomes difficult to compare it with the previous series that you have. So by using this new methodology, back year's GDP would also be calculated, so that for research purpose, we can easily compare the two GDP figures. So that is something we need to ensure. And then seasonal adjustment needs to be done. So for that, we should use the CPI series, and we should show the analyst that there is a genuine economic slowdown which usually happens after the festival season is done away with. Okay, so seasonal adjustment needs to be done in the GDP, so that we can understand that whether it is a slowdown or it is just because the festive season has ended. Okay, and another suggestion, already the government has stated that they will be doing this, that is, we need to change the base year of WPI also, because you are using WPI as a deflator, and over a period of time the government has stated that they would be using producer price index also, which tells us the change in the prices of goods and services at the producer level. So that is something which we need to do, and this is also something suggested by UN systems of accounts as well. Okay, that's all that we need to know. Previously UPSC has asked a question on this particular GDP thing. Based on our discussion, I have framed a practice question for you people, so do practice this. And with this, let's move on to the simplified segment. Now, beginning with the prelim pointer segment, recently Arvind Kejriwal and 22 others have been discharged by a special court when it comes to the excise policy case, which was framed by CBI. And in this particular respect, the court has ordered a departmental inquiry when it comes to the investigating officers. Why the court has said this? Because according to the court, the people were framed or they were accused despite there was absence of any material evidence. Okay, and that is the reason the court have discharged all these people. In this particular backdrop, CBI is again in news, so we'll be covering the prelim pointers related to CBI. So when you talk about the CBI, it is not a constitutional body and neither it is a statutory body. So it is basically an executive body. It was created way back in 1963 based on the resolution of Ministry of Home Affairs, and this was created based on the recommendation of Santhanam Committee. Then when it comes to CBI, since it is not a statutory body, so from where it is deriving the powers? So it is deriving the powers to investigate from Delhi Special Police Establishment Act of 1946. Now you need to make a distinction between this fact that despite CBI is not a statutory body, it is deriving the power from this particular act. Some of you would be thinking that, ma'am, if it is deriving the power, why it is not a statutory body? Because this act does not lead to the creation of CBI. Okay, when an act leads to a creation of a particular body, then we say that this body is a statutory body. When it comes to CBI, it has not been created through this particular act. It is merely deriving the powers through this particular, from this particular act, that is Delhi Special Police Establishment Act of 1946. Then when you talk about the CBI, it is working under Ministry of Personal, Pension and Public Grievances, and it is India's nodal agency when it comes to collaborating and coordinating investigations on behalf of Interpol member countries. When it comes to the composition of CBI, so CBI has a director who is basically appointed based on the recommendation of a committee which consists of PM as the chairman, CGI or a Supreme Court judge, and leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha. When you talk about the tenure of the director of CBI, so it has been provided with the secure tenure of 2 years by the Central Vigilance Commission Act of 2003, and based on the amendment done in the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act in 2021, this tenure can be extended for 5 years, but 1 year at a time. Okay, it's not like after 2 years you can directly increase the tenure for another set of 2 years. No, 1 year at a time, and maximum it could be extended till 5 years. Now, what are the powers and the functions of CBI? So, central government can authorize the CBI to investigate a crime in a state, but the CBI needs to get the consent of the concerned state. This has been mentioned under section 6 of the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. Whereas, when it comes to states like West Bengal, Rajasthan, Kerala, they have withdrawn this general consent. So, what is the implication? Now, if the CBI has to carry out any investigation in these particular state, it needs to get the permission from the state government for case-to-case basis. Okay, general consent means that the state has given the consent, you don't need to get the consent of the state government for every case. But if the state has withdrawn that general consent, then in that case CBI has to take the consent of the state government for every particular case. But there is an exception to this. If the court has ordered the CBI to do some investigation, then in that case CBI do not need to take the consent of that respective state. Okay, when it comes to CBI, it can investigate the case on a suo motu basis in the union territories. That's all that we need to know when it comes to CBI. Let's move on to the next topic. Now, recently, Pakistan has carried out airstrike on various places when it comes to Afghanistan. This particular topic you can associate with places in news. And Pakistan has clearly stated that this is now an open war. Earlier, cross-border attacks were going on from both the sides, but now Pakistan has stated that this is an open war against Afghanistan. And these airstrike has been done under Operation Gajab Lil Haq. And these are the places wherein the Pakistan has carried out airstrike. That is Kabul, Paktia and Khandar. As you can see, majority of the attacks are reported near the Durand line. Now, why Pakistan is carrying out attacks against Afghanistan? The reason being that Pakistan government has pointed out that Afghanistan is providing support to Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is trying to overthrow the legitimate government of Pakistan, and this group is carrying out terror attacks within the Pakistan. So this has escalated tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and one another reason which has led to this deterioration of relationship between the Afghanistan and Pakistan is the close ties between India and Afghanistan. Okay, because the ties between India and Afghanistan has improved over a period of time. So that is another triggering factor. Now, when you talk about the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, this was the one who carried out the terror attack in the Peshawar school in 2014. And when it comes to this particular terror group, it is attacking the various regions in the Pakistan, especially near the northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region, this red color region as you can see. Okay, and the international think tank, that is International Crisis Group, has pointed out that previously Pakistan has taken various measures, like it has forcibly deported Afghan refugees, it has launched airstrike on supposed Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan bases also, and that ways it was somewhere triggering and and it led to deterioration of relation between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now, let's understand what is this Durand line, because this is important from PLIM's perspective. So this was formed way back in 1893, and this was formed as a result of agreement between the Foreign Secretary of British India, that was Sir Mortimer Duran and between Amir Abdur Rahman Khan, who was basically the leader of the Afghanistan at that time. And this basically divided the spheres of influence between Afghanistan and British India. This splitted the Pashtun and Baloch communities, and this is roughly a 2,640 kilometer line. It was in Third Anglo-Afghan War, wherein the Treaty of Rawalpindi was, signed, and wherein the Afghan accepted somewhere the Durand line. Okay. But after independence, things changed. Pakistan accepted this Durand line, but Afghanistan said that we do not recognize this line because it is merely a colonial creation. And what is the other reason of dispute? One is the connectivity tactics which is used by Pakistan. Now you need to understand that this Afghanistan is a landlocked country, and time and again Pakistan has blocked the trade routes. Okay, that has severely impacted the trade which Afghanistan carries out with India. So that is another reason. These are the other bone of contention between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Previously, Pakistan was supporting the Taliban-led government in Afghanistan, but since the Taliban-led government has started supporting, that has been alleged by the Pakistan government that they are providing support to Taliban Pakistan, that has deteriorated the relations between the two. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently, Supreme Court has taken a suo motu action, and it has ordered a complete blanket ban when it comes to Class 8 Social Science new NCERT book, because it has a chapter which was dealing with the corruption in the judiciary. This particular topic again is related to polity prelims. So what has happened? The new Class 8 Social Science textbook, which had a section on corruption in judiciary. So the moment it was introduced in the market, Supreme Court take a suo motu action. No case was filed. Supreme Court acted on its own, and it has imposed a complete blanket ban when it comes to this book's further publication. So NCERT has to bring back this particular book, Class 8 NCERT Social Science textbook. Previously also, there were various instances which were not accepted well by different segments. For example, various changes were made in Class 12 Sociology textbook. It has done away with the chapter dealing with untouchability and how it operates. Then again in Class 12 Sociology book, a paragraph which dealt with how minorities are politically vulnerable, this was also removed. Okay. So when it comes to NCERT, it is upgrading the NCERT booklets. This is in alignment with the National Curriculum Framework for School Education 2023. Now what becomes important from our exam perspective is various pointers related to NCERT, because this body has been in news for quite some time. Now when it comes to NCERT, it is an autonomous organization which was set up in 1961 by the Government of India, and it basically assists the central government and the state government when it comes to policies especially related to school education. What are the major objectives? To promote, coordinate research in areas related to school education. Okay, prepare and publish model textbook, like what it is doing. NCERT textbook, provide supplementary material, newsletters, etc. Organize, training of the teachers, develop and disseminate innovative educational techniques, basically improving the pedagogical method, how you improve the retention and the way of learning when it comes to students. Collaborate and network with state educational departments, universities, NGOs. Act as a clearing house for ideas which are basically related to school education. So one thing you will see that NCERT is basically related to school education and not to higher education and all. Okay. And it is the implementing agency when it comes to carrying out bilateral cultural exchange program in the field of school education. Then when it comes to National Education Policy of 2020, NCERT is the nodal agency to develop the National Curriculum Framework. We discussed that this updation in the textbook is being done under the National Curriculum Framework, which was introduced in 2023 under this new educational policy itself. When you talk about the headquarters, it is located in Sir Aurobindo Marg, New Delhi itself. Now, when you talk about the organizational structure of NCERT, you have the Union Ministry of Education, who is the president and the ex officio chairman of the general body of the NCERT. When you talk about the members of the general body, so it basically includes education ministers of all the states and union territories. The secretary of NCERT is the convener of the general body. The executive committee is the main governing body of the NCERT, and it has the Union Ministry of Education as its president and the Union Minister of State in the Ministry of Education as the vice president. It is the executive body which assists in the work, okay, is assisted in its work by various standing and committees and boards. So when you talk about the executive committee, it is provided assistance by various standing committees and boards. And the function of the council are looked after by the director, joint director and the secretary. That's all that we need to know with respect to NCERT. Let's move on to the next topic. Now, India is going to get new batch of 8 cheetahs from Botswana today. And all these cheetahs would be translocated to Kuno National Park, which is situated in Madhya Pradesh. This particular topic you can associate with the environment section of our prelim syllabus. Now, from mapping point of view, you can get a question related to the countries which are sharing the border with Botswana. So, you need to make note of that it shares the border with Zambia, Namibia, South Africa and Zimbabwe. Now, let's make note of prelim pointers related to cheetahs. So, cheetahs are the world's fastest land mammal which can attain a speed of 60 to 70 miles per hour. And one unique fact which you need to make note of with respect to cheetah, that they are the only big cats who cannot roar. So, they, instead of roaring, they chirp, purr, etc. And only large carnivore which is extant in India since 1952. So, there are 2 variants of cheetah. One is the African cheetah, whose IUCN status is vulnerable because they are found in Africa. And another one is Asiatic cheetah. Their status is critically endangered, okay, because they are only found in Iran. And as of December 2025, India has around 30 cheetahs, and this 8 would be increasing the number further. When it comes to African cheetah, they are slightly brownish and they have a golden skin. The skin is thicker than the Asiatic cheetah and more prominent spots and lines are there on their face. When it comes to Asiatic cheetah, they are slightly smaller as compared to the African ones. Their skin color is basically pale yellowish and they have more fur under the belly. You need to make note of peculiar characteristics with respect to African and Asiatic cheetah, because on these lines prelims questions could be formed. Now, let's make note of regarding Project Cheetah. Now, when it comes to Project Cheetah, as you see, when it comes to the cheetahs that we have got previously from Namibia and South Africa, all have been translocated to Kuno National Park, which is situated in MP. Why, the cheetahs are being translocated to Kuno National Park only? Because it has an ideal habitat, abundant prey available and minimal human disturbances there. Okay, this Project Cheetah was launched way back in 2022 and the aim is basically to restore the grassland ecosystem, because cheetah are a keystone species when it comes to grassland ecosystem, and the implementing agency would be National Tiger Conservation Authority, which is basically a statutory body under the Ministry of Environment. And it was created under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. And when you talk about Project Cheetah, we have a Project Cheetah Steering Committee also, which has been established by NTCA itself way back in 2023. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently we have lost 2 Agniveer trainees and it is suspected that they have died because of meningococcal disease. So, in this respect, the Meghalaya state government has increased the disease surveillance. This particular topic you can associate with the general science segment of your prelim syllabus. Now, when you talk about this disease, it is a rare but serious bacterial infection. It is basically caused by this bacteria, Neisseria meningitis. And it basically causes the membrane, which basically covers our brain and the spinal cord, to inflate. And that is the reason it becomes a serious disease. There are 2 types of infections. One is meningitis, another one is septicemia, which leads to poisoning of the blood also. Although they are rare, but they are very severe, okay, because the bacteria would be impacting the body in a very short period of time. And about 1 in 10 people, they have this bacteria at the back of their nose without being ill. But the moment it attacks your body, then it takes very less time, okay, to make you very severely ill. Sometimes it evades the body and cause the illness. Now, when you talk about the transmission, it is basically transmitted through saliva or spit. If you are sharing cigarettes, if you are sharing, used glasses, etc. So, that ways it can be spread. Now, when you talk about the symptoms would be fever, headache, stiff neck, you will be bothered by the bright light, which is also known as photophobia, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and a rash made up of pinpoints that look darker and it would be in the shade of red and purple. Now, the government, okay, the PIB websites points out that since this disease progresses very rapidly, it would take roughly 12 hours, okay, to bring you in a very serious situation. So that is the reason the government has pointed out that if anybody is witnessing any of the two symptoms, please, meet a doctor immediately, as soon as possible. And when you talk about this particular disease, it's not like it is for the first time we are witnessing this disease. Previously also we had this, outbreak. So we witnessed the outbreak of this particular disease in 1980s also and in 1966 also. Now, we have one vaccine to treat this, that is meningococcal polysaccharide vaccine, which is not used when it comes to children who are below the age of 2 years, okay, because it has not been that much efficient or effective when it comes to the infants who are below the 2 years of age, although it is effective when it comes to the adults. What are other ways to treat this particular disease? So it is treated with antibiotics apart from this particular vaccine, and oxygen therapy is provided to the patients, and drugs are provided to basically deal with the low blood pressure also. That's all that we need to learn in today's Analyst. Quiz would be coming right up next, so don't forget to practice the quiz and check your knowledge. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a great day, all of you.